Let's do this.
Okay, welcome everyone. Just really excited to be on tonight and to be hosting this event and having this meaningful conversation. You know, for me, it's not a discussion that is a side discussion, but this is something that I live every day. When I left Kenya several years ago, I did not know, you often, we read about slavery, we had about discrimination. Oftentimes my sisters and my brothers will tell me their experiences in Europe and in America. And I just could not imagine. I was still excited about coming out here and experiencing the snow. The Rocky Mountains were fascinating, the big buildings, but little did I know that I had to experience some of the worst experiences of my time, actually, when I started university. So I'm excited that if this is not a conversation that I'm having with my Black friends or my Asian friends or other minorities friends, but it's something that now we have no choice than really have that conversation. I'm so excited tonight to be introducing Kathy Lee, who is going to be our host and moderator for the night. Kathy is one of my best friends. We've had this conversation and really relate in so many ways because she's got her own stories to tell. From an Asian perspective, and I have my African, yet those stories are so similar. Kathy is an extremely brilliant woman, an accomplished journalist that works with CTV News Calgary. She has gotten so many awards. I cannot name them all, but the one that it touched me so much is during COVID, when she put herself out there and she had to really showcase the racism that was happening in our own city right here in Calgary. So when people say that, oh, it doesn't happen, it does happen. And Kathy interviewed so many and put out an award-winning that really showed that we're not there yet. We need to continue to have this conversation. Kathy has done so much. She shows up in our community. She's a member of the Rotary Club here in Calgary and volunteers in so many aspects. Kathy, when she's not looking pretty on TV and really showcasing these important aspects, she's hiking with me. I'm so proud, Kathy, to have you tonight. I'm so proud to have you as an ally, and can't wait to see where the night goes tonight.
Thank you so much, Eve, for that wonderful introduction. I put you in high regard, and I am so grateful for your friendship. And I'm so grateful that you have invited me into this space today to talk about the importance of diversity, inclusion, representation in any aspect of, the world, I guess. But today we're talking about business. Before we start, though, I do want to say there's a flash discount sale for the next 2 hours for all of our guests watching today, 25%. All you have to do is put in the code. It's February 25, 25% off. And I do use Eve's products and I love them. I'm not being biased. Actually, I am being biased, but I do love them. But thank you again, Eve, for that wonderful introduction. And again, thank you for inviting me into this conversation today about, again, the importance of diversity, representation in the workforce, in any industry for that matter. Like you said, you and I have had many conversations about this and how, although some companies have made progress, we need more action and we have a long way to go still, okay? And that action and dedication to make changes needs to come from the top. So speaking of the top, I am honored to be moderating this panel this afternoon, and I look forward to hearing the insights and perspectives from some very well-respected individuals from different sectors. First, I'd like to introduce Kathleen Marin. So Kathleen, is an experienced groundbreaker at UPS with a 28-year demonstrated history of leading in the logistics and supply chain industry. She is skilled in execution, business planning, pricing strategy, market research, management, digital platforms, and transportation. She is a strong marketing professional with a master's of international business focused in marketing and Japanese from the University of South Carolina. She is an active member of Leadership Atlanta, Golden Seeds, and a proud board member of both the Greater Women's Business Council and Girl Scouts of Greater Atlanta. Our next guest is Felicia Lekan-Salami. Felicia is the Divisional Vice President, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Bay and Hudson's Bay. Felicia is a Big Four trained management consultant with experience in various industries and countries. She is passionate about team and executive development, developing and implementing programs and initiatives that ensure inclusion, belonging, and growth. Felicia firmly believes that people make a difference and that together, everybody achieves more. I could not agree more with that. And our third guest on the panel today is Peter Sullivan. Peter is a partner in the Banking and Specialty Finance Group and Deputy Chair of the Financial Services Group at Castles, which is a Canadian law firm focused on serving the transaction, advocacy, and advisory needs of the country's most dynamic business sectors. Peter's practice focuses primarily on financing transactions, acting for both lenders and borrowers involved in domestic and cross-border financings and corporate reorganizations. In addition to his busy legal practice, Peter also serves as the co-chair of the firm's Inclusion and Diversity Committee and is the founder and past chair of the 2S LGBTQ+ affinity group. He dedicates significant time and energy in leadership positions across the broader legal community through serving as vice chair of the Diversity Committee and chair of the marketing board of the American Bar Association's business law section. And of course, our final guest, last but not least, is Evelyn, founder of Ellie Bianca. Eve is a socially conscious innovator and the driving force behind the luxurious all-natural skincare line. Ellie Bianca is no novice to the business world, of course. She holds an undergraduate degree in environmental sciences with biology and chemistry majors and a master's of science in environmental management. Eve provides strategic planning on high-profile projects worldwide and has held many energy sector leadership positions. And through Ellie Bianca, she has not only created a skincare line, which is amazing, but also a pro-women's empowerment venture designed to heal not just the skin, but the soul. So Ellie Bianca is a beacon of hope and global connection. So thank you to all of you. As our guests are hearing today, we have high performance panelists here, and I'm excited to jump into this discussion. So let's get right to it. I'm going to direct my first question to Kathleen. Kathleen, why does diversity, equity, inclusion, representation, why does it matter to a company like UPS?
Kathy, thanks number one to you and to Eveline and everybody else on the panel with me today. And I'm so glad to be a part of this. This topic is not just a big one for my company, UPS, but it's an important one for me personally. So when we look at it, and as I've had to help lead the company in designing some of our objectives under diversity and inclusion, we call it the flywheel effect. And it's a practical business approach that's just smart business. At the end of the day, when you have the right representation of employees, you allow yourself to find new vendors, which are great, innovative ways to change the way your company thinks about things. UPS has been a long advocate of supplier diversity. We're one of the biggest vendors in the globe with smaller and women and diverse-owned businesses. When you have a diverse workforce, you find other customers, which again is the bread and butter for most publicly traded companies. So we find new ways to talk to our customers on levels that make sense to them, that not everybody else does. So we don't treat everybody with the same broad brush. It's not an effective marketing strategy. So our employees help us find the right communications, the right manner, the right targeted accounts, if you will, think about it that way. The other way where our employees, when they're diverse and involved and helping us think through things, they help us identify problems in our communities. So UPS is a huge company around the world. We feel we do the right things philanthropically, charitably, advocacy-wise. We break down barriers within government to help companies be able to trade and do different things and grow. We do that because our employees help us find what's needed in the community, to find dollars, to find voices, et cetera. And at the end of the day, when you do all that, what's interesting is it works the other direction too. When I have customers who want to be my customers, when I have vendors who want to be our vendors and continue to bring in things, when I have communities who recognize the importance that UPS brings to them in dollars and voice, I have people who want to work for us. I get better employees by having these other reach outs. So it just connects all together. And if you don't have that, and we've seen it, we're a 117-year-old company, and goodness knows we've had our own journeys over those years, and they haven't been all as inclusive as they are today. When we've not done that, we haven't grown as fast. Our last few years with a female CEO, the first one we've ever had, with a larger voice publicly out there on social justice, on community, being intentional about how we find vendors, being directive in how we market our services in unique and new ways without being pandering, we're growing. And it's not just because of COVID, we're growing because we're being smarter about how we create this inclusion message to not just be a message, but to be a foundational format of our business. So hopefully, I'm excited about the fact that this is starting to work. I've been designing this for years and it's finally getting a little bit of that momentum. So Kathy, that's why I think it's important.
You know, Kathleen, I really love your passion about this. You know what I mean? And I love that with a 117-year-old company that you know has gone through growing pains, you're seeing that having diversity and inclusion is working. And I really appreciate that because you are in a position of higher up and you see that it's working and you want to be able to keep progressing in that direction. We'll come back to you, but I do want to ask, you know, Felicia, again, you are in a position where you are also advocating for diversity and inclusion. And again, all of you, so Eve, Peter, Felicia, yourself, Kathleen, you guys have all made steps to push it in that direction. And I applaud each and every one of you, but I'm sure it could not have been easy. So Felicia, my question to you is what barriers, I know that you have this vision and we all have this vision to do this, but it's not easy. So what barriers have you faced to try to recruit more diversity into the Bay?
Yeah, I like how Kat put it. I mean, we've all not been as inclusive as we are today. It is a journey that we're all taking. And I'm glad to see that diversity, equity, and inclusion has come to a place where it's no longer a nice to have, it's a must have for every progressive organization. But having said that, it's sometimes easier said than done. It's a hard work. It's not an easy journey, but it's one that is possible with the intentionality that we all bring and the passion that we all need to make this work. There are barriers and there are challenges, and the major barriers are centered around what you would call natural biases or even unconscious bias, because we've all done things in certain ways. And in the last few years, incidences have happened that have brought things to the fore, and a lot of people are more conscious about how diverse am I? Is my company equitable? Is inclusion even a thing in my organization? So we're asking ourselves more questions, and this is also putting us in a position of more accountability as to what we as individual leaders, our associates, and our organizations as a whole are doing to overcome this. So I mean, there are multiple challenges and barriers that you find, but the main ones are centered around those things that we've been used to that we now have to break, right? So those biases. And for us, I mean, we've been very intentional about how we incorporate DEI as a holistic lens throughout the business. So it's integrated through what we call our 4 pillars. Our DEI strategy is centered around 4 pillars, which is our people, our products, our communities, and our customers. So at the end of the day, we want to ensure that everything that we're doing is targeting those pillars in a way that is truly inclusive. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Felicia. It has to go further than just hiring people in minority backgrounds, right? I mean, once you get them in those seats, then it's about understanding their backgrounds, where they come from, you know what I mean? And how are we able to ensure that they want to stay, that they're not feeling inequities, or they're not feeling, right? Because I know, and I don't want to, I don't want to put, from my own experiences, I am a minority person in a position at my job. However, I have noticed certain things that have made me go, that wasn't right, or that makes me feel excluded, or that makes me completely offended in some kind of way. And again, when you have unconscious biases or, microaggressions, and you don't realize that you're doing it, it can really chisel away at that individual, right? I want to direct this question to Peter, because I know, Peter, you in your firm, there are certain programmings or initiatives in place to try to ensure that the diverse talent that you recruit are the ones that they're happy to stay there, and they feel included, and they don't feel like, they feel like there's an ability to be able to advance, and that their work is meaningful. Can you give us a little bit more insight into that?
Sure, Kathy, thanks. And very happy to, because I think it's important when we have our diverse talent recruited, it's only very much the first step. Any organization that's going to actually put meaning behind it is going to ensure that there's representation at the top levels, so that we've got champions, mentors, people that look like me or have my personal characteristic as a diverse candidate, who have succeeded and been retained within the organization. So if you talk the talk, but you don't walk the walk, because people will, there'll be a high level of attrition, and people will just decide to move elsewhere where they do see future prospects for themselves, you're failing as an organization. So we've, at Castles, we're a professional services firm, and therefore it's about the value add that we have as lawyers is to be creative, solve problems, have different perspectives, and welcome the broad spectrum of people that make up our firm, confident to really speak their minds, really not waste their energy on hiding any aspect of themselves, or not celebrating any aspect of themselves, and putting that energy into being creative problem solvers. So, I think if we can have all sorts of programming in place, we can have education in place, but if we don't have meaningful work opportunities and have a fair distribution of the work that's going to allow all candidates to advance at the same level, or have the same opportunities to get the juicy files, or the client contact out for dinners and building those relationships, what have you, those candidates will not stick around. So things like diversity audits, internal diversity audits, where you have teams where with a client service leader, client service partner, whomever those people are who are actually allocating the work, have their teams reviewed to say, look, you have candidates of diverse backgrounds and personal characteristics, and yet you've got the straight white male team from top to bottom. What are you doing wrong? Why aren't you accessing the diverse talent and giving them the opportunities? So engaging in audits of your client service teams to identify those areas, but then really actually having some teeth behind them to say, if you fail these audits, you're not providing these opportunities to everybody who, as I say, recruitment is the first step. If you have the talent and you are providing the talent with meaningful opportunities to advance and learn, you're going to have the talent at every level and be able to really staff those teams with diverse representation. So, have consequences, have penalties and compensation, have lack of bonus, whatever it is that you can tie to at the top levels through your executive or your board, saying if you are not going to be a team player in this respect, you're going to actually feel a penalty. That can actually really make a difference and force people to, if they're not going to do it for the right reasons, do it because it speaks to their own self-interest. So that's sort of one meaningful, I think, program that you could, or type of initiative you can put in place. But The other sort of softer side of it from a programming perspective is something I'm very proud of at Castles, and that's an affinity group or an employee resource program, policy development, that you welcome groups who do share a personal characteristic or background to get together and share mentorship and championship opportunities, share business development or professional development opportunities, be a safe space to talk about issues discrete to your personal characteristic or background, and lobby the organization to be aware of what issues are important to you as a group, and listen. So those are just a couple that I was thinking of. I thought I'd share with the group, because I think, sharing amongst groups like this evening, and I welcome any other people who have different types of programs to speak up as well or ask a question about it, because this is how we're all going to learn.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was going to add something on what Kat and Felicia and Peter have said, is that companies are looking at diversity and inclusion as really a way of building competitiveness. Because how do you build that competitiveness? You are going to have diverse thoughts, people that come from different backgrounds, are coming with different experiences. And if you're putting them in the decision-making position, they're right there in the table, you will be shocked how they enhance the company, hence building your competitiveness. You're going to look much better, because someone could have come maybe from Africa, someone could have come from India, from Asia, and they're bringing that collective experience, hence making you stronger.
That's a really good point, Eve. And I think that a lot of people are starting to have this awareness around how diversity makes a company or a group stronger, right? Because you are coming from different backgrounds and experiences. So I want to ask this question to the entire panel, so feel free to jump in. Obviously, all four of you recognize this, okay? However, what if you were working for a company and you so badly want to take the initiative, but you're not at the top? So how do you convince those decision makers at the top to take action and implement some of the programming that Peter talked about, or even the mindset that Felicia and Kathleen? How do you start doing that? What if they're so archaic in their thinking? Because I'll be honest with you, this has been the biggest challenge. I open the floor.
I think
Go
ahead, Felicia. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I was going to say that clearly our strength is in our diversity, and a lot of organizations are realizing this today, that diversity is not just about your skin color or your race. There's so many dimensions to it. Like Evelyn mentioned, the diversity of thoughts, or even the diversity in background. What I've seen, at least at two organizations that I've been at, including the one that I'm at now, is that the ERGs have a lot of power. And so when you talk about grassroots impact, it starts from there, because they're the voice of the associates. Like everybody, regardless of your level, is represented at the ERG level. And so the power that organizations can give to those groups can determine how fast they progress their DEI practices, or even the effectiveness of this programming and initiatives that we're talking about. Because to your point, Kathy, you might have some organizations where the leaders don't just get it, because it's not direct numbers on their bottom line, which in fact can be. And I think Kat mentioned that if you have a more diverse organization, in turn, your people will thrive, because they will be able to bring their authentic self. They will be able to do better work, and in turn, the company is going to make more money and be a better organization for it. So it's just the reverse engineering of even the leaders of an organization thinking that, and knowing that the more power we give to our people to have their voices heard and to have their contributions implemented, the better it is for everyone, for the leaders, for the organization, for the association. So I guess in summary, I just wanted to say that, to answer your question, there is power in those ERGs or those affinity groups. And I think organizations should pay more attention to empowering those groups.
Okay, thanks so much, Felicia. Peter, go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I actually think if I were with an organization where there was an uphill battle to convince the senior leadership that this is something that needs to be focused on, supported financially and supported actively, as in by showing up and participating from the senior levels, I wouldn't be interested in trying. I would probably say, you yourselves are going to learn a very hard lesson. You are going to lose your customer base. You are going to lose your client base, or at least, from our perspective as a legal firm, be moved down or off of preferred counsel lists with important clients. And I say this because, and it may be a position of privilege to be able to say something along these lines. We have clients who say, show us. We need you to prove that you, and this is sort of speaking to the internal diversity audits that I mentioned earlier. We have external diversity audits, and clients will say, we want to see what your team makeups are. We want to see not just from a token perspective, but that diverse talent is receiving meaningful opportunities to work, as in a certain percentage of the hours worked on our files. And if you don't do that, you will be either moved down or off of our preferred counsel list, and you'll lose the accounts. So the work there, from a professional services perspective, is almost being done by our clients, by our customers, because they're saying, if you're not going to do it, then we're gonna leave you. So again, it's easy for me to say because I'm with an organization that really does show up, really does support, and I'm very proud of that, as I've been a part of it for a long time. But it's, again, if an organization is going to resist it, I think they'll find themselves falling behind faster and faster, and they deserve it. We need to all go on this we need to be on this journey together on the same path and not be resisting.
So, Kathy, I'd love to add my short story if I can too on this, because I think it's a good question, and I think a good example of that. I've been at my company for 29 years. It's a transportation company. It's a trucking company. When I graduated from college, I was one of the few women at this company, and I didn't even know I wanted to be there. I thought this is a group of, for the most part, white men. We weren't international, and it was a struggle. I was often the only female in the meetings, and you got talked over, you got ignored. It was not the best environment all the time, but I had somebody tell me early on, if I had these ideals that I wanted to be in an organization that actually was internationally minded, was inclusive, respected people who had different aspects, I needed to do it in-house. I needed to make those efforts as best as I could. So over my years, again, it's not always been easy, but the things that worked for me, at least, that I think are better now for people coming in these days. One, I had to perform really high. In some cases, maybe higher than my peers. That's just a given. And we do that in ethnicity groups too. We recognize that. So I had to make sure that it was spotless to a large extent. When I got that, I got more recognition and I got more power to be able to do different things. Second thing I did is I pulled as many other people with me as possible. Maybe not always formally, but we did it through either, we call them BRG groups or ERG groups, and they weren't formal. The company in the beginning didn't declare, let's create them. We created them. We found them and we said, this is what we need to just survive in an organization that was not as inclusive as it could have been at the time. And we found the ways to inspire each other. And then we found power as that group, I think, as Felicia said, to then push it up. And then the area that I found really beneficial as a marketer was kind of where Peter was going. At the end of the day, as I continued to grow and show my performance and have these peer influence areas, I actually started to just run the numbers. And numbers speak more volume than anything else. So numbers about why women were leaving the organization, why ethnically diverse people were leaving the organization, or my teams. Then you take it into the outside world. Why are our customers not buying our story? Because we don't relate to them, right? Why do our vendors not come back, or why do they fall out? Because they're small businesses, we're not supporting them. We're not helping them in the ways that we could as a big venture. When the numbers started to make sense, we started to see some change. And it still is an uphill battle, sure, But the last thing that's really pushed us over the top, and I give my CEO ample credit for this, the board of UPS finally decided it was time. After they saw the numbers, they saw the problems, they put a female in charge, they looked at our board in total, and we've reversed a lot of those changes. We now have a 31% diverse board, which is making a difference because they're willing to hear these arguments more than they were when I was 24 and fighting on my own in a sea that I thought, you know, I was the only one in. The good news is newer people coming in don't have to face those battles. They'll have their own, certainly over their 28 years, I have no doubt. But I'm hoping that at least my generation at UPS has broken some of those barriers down and they'll be easier and they'll fight other fights that will make it even stronger.
Eve, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, thanks everyone for sharing those insights. You know, I can relate in different ways. You know, I've been in those situations, Kat, where you have to work, you know, 3 times as harder. That's kind of what we were told. You have to work 3 times as harder. My father, whenever I complain, he would say, you have to be so good so that they don't ignore you. You need to stand out, find ways to stand out. You know, what has been meaningful for me, you know, throughout my career, and I'm so happy that I can build Ellie Bianca without that stress, it's really finding out who are the allies. Who is there? Is it the men? Is it the women? And having those side conversations really, really helped my career early on. You know, those that believe in you, those that might not have the bias, and using them to really push the narrative forward and not being afraid. You know, I oftentimes at those early days in my career, they'll say, you know, where does this girl come from? Because I will challenge even the vice president of a company or president of a company when I saw that it was not right. And I've stood up in so many places saying, you're not just going to check that checkbox, right? Especially for American companies, I guess Canada slowly we're starting, but for American companies those days, there was those checkbox of, you know, is she a woman? Check. How many women do you have? Check. You know, is she Black? Check. And I said, no, I'm not going to be statistics. You have to invest in me. You have to support me. So putting yourself out sometimes, it gives others an opportunity. It really gets the company to look at its lenses. You know, of course, at Ellie Bianca, we're now very, very, very intentional, bringing those experiences and saying, we're going to hire women. We're going to really create a diverse group. We're going to hire immigrants and create opportunities and really say, you know, stand out, go out, make something out of yourself. We're just a platform. And then have others to really pushing us out there. And if it's suppliers, really looking and saying, you know, if your values are not aligned, just really not buying from them. You know, I don't care how good your ingredients are. If the value alignment is not there, I don't care how cheap your price is, we're going to step aside.
Eve, you brought up a couple of different points. I kind of want to dissect a little bit here. I know that with Ellie Bianca, 100%, it's the intention. And I think that with the rest of the panel, the same thing, there was intention there to make a change. And I think with other businesses out there, whether they are forward thinking or not, they have to set the intention to say, this is a plan moving forward in order to make a difference. I want to talk about the allyship there, Eve, because you had expressed how much it has helped you, and you're looking at those who don't look like you, who are the majority. Those are the allies we are talking about, right, Eve? Those are allies. Exactly. So without, you know, I'm being obvious here, but we were talking earlier before we started, like, you know, when we look at Peter, we see Peter as a massive ally. Like it is extraordinary. And it is amazing that you were here. And I mean, even Kathleen, you know, the color of your skin makes a big difference, but supporting people of color, and we are grateful, we are thankful. And so I want to bring the question over to Felicia here in terms of allyship. You know, how much of a difference has it made for you?
Allyship makes all the difference because, I mean, like we mentioned earlier on, together everyone achieves more. So one can achieve 10, two can achieve 1,000. And I think that's the place that allyship has to play, in that, at the end of the day, we all need support one way or the other. And I'm going to go to 15% pledge. For a lot of people, it's just a pledge. For us, it's more than a pledge. It's an intentional action to become not just allies, but to become champions of this segments that lack as much representation as we would all love it to be. And we know that every little counts. So I mean, that's our commitment to BIPOC owned brands, to say that a certain percentage of every new product that we onboard will be BIPOC owned. And so we become an ally to that community. And not just because we want to increase our diversity numbers, but because we want to truly grow. We want to truly embrace sustainable growth across major areas, and that's one of the roles that an ally has to play, because sometimes people feel alone. Even if you think about representation from a talent perspective, I've read researches recently or papers recently where people don't want to be one of one in an organization. They want to be one of many. And so where there are no allies to raise people's voices and to bring other people to the table, then you find that, people are exiting a company because they don't see themselves in the leadership, for example. So, I mean, we could go on and on, but I think allies have a huge, huge role to play. So every opportunity that we find to be an ally, we have to take it. Every opportunity that we find to show people why allyship is important, we have to give that education as well. Yeah.
I agree with you. Allyship is incredibly important. We have amazing allies here, again, like I said, on this panel. So my next question is to Peter and Kathleen. You guys are allies. So how do you convince others to be allies too?
So it's a good question. And I always think about, for myself and for how I lead my team, I always ask the questions, is allyship enough? Because I think starting to evolve into advocacy, which is to me just a smidge even stronger, because it is great to be part of a group and be able to talk through things like the early things I mentioned earlier. But at the same time, sometimes people, I found, fall back into, hey, I don't do anything wrong. I don't discriminate, so therefore I'm an ally. Well, no, I think you really don't get to say and declare you're an ally if you're not actually doing something. You're taking an action, which to me is at least bare minimum is an advocacy. So it's when you see something happening in a meeting, or when you see something that's going wrong with your organization or even outside of it, are you in a position of privilege, as I happen to be, maybe with my color and my title? Am I actually standing up and changing that? Am I calling it out? For years, honestly, I think a lot of us didn't. We just assumed that the passive piece was enough. We didn't do anything wrong, so therefore we're good. Days are gone. That's not it anymore. I have to have the voice. I have to use the power. I have to grab the people to pull them up, and I have to shake the people who need to be shaken and say, stop doing what you're doing and change the direction. Okay. Within that, I have to be a very cognizant leader, though, too. I have a diverse group across the country, across the globe, and everybody's definition of what diversity means varies. Different countries look at diversity different than we do in the US or Canada, perhaps. So one of it is understanding what the definition of diversity is, finding those people who are natural advocates, cross-connecting those advocates into the intersectionality, because none of us are just one thing anyways, right? There are pieces of all of what we do that could align and advocate on behalf of each other. And it's putting that voice out there. And sometimes, honestly, it can be a little scary for that person who is taking that chance that they didn't in the past. So my job as a leader is not only to encourage the diverse people to speak up on behalf of themselves, it's the other, often white males in my organization, say, I'm going to recognize you when you do something good on behalf of the rest of your team. and make them want to do it more frequently with a safe space to do it. That's when you get the voice moving. That's, I think, when you get the advocacy, and then you get the change.
Couldn't say it better myself, Kat. It's exactly what I agree entirely. It's just check. But just to pick up on what you're saying, I really love the sort of leadership aspect of what you're saying. And we had a session in our organization last week where it was actually called Allyship is Leadership. And it's difficult. The point that was being made is it's a very uncomfortable line to walk to be an ally. If you see blatant activity or blatant comments that are easy to stand up against, that should be easy. But sometimes it's from those who may rank above you in the organization, who may be difficult to call out. And that's only one piece of it, because the right thing to do, if you see blatantly wrong conduct in that regard, you should be brave enough to do it, and even if it's very difficult. But it's then sort of the how, because if you sometimes you look at a situation and you'll say, well, I know I have to call that out. I know I have to correct that if I'm truly going to be a meaningful ally. But the impact of it, if you do it the wrong way, could be to have somebody dig their heels in, not learn from it, but in fact, decide they're going to engage in the activity or be the block that they were being even more. So to find out how to really walk that line and do it in a way that will be compassionate to the person you're being an ally to, not embarrass them or make them feel that they were the catalyst for some sort of dispute, but also correct the behavior that needs to be educated, I suppose. They do provide the education that will correct the behavior is never easy. And so it really does involve putting yourself out there to think about it carefully, figure out the right way, and then walk that line. And it's, I've been there myself many times, and I think the more you're known as an ally, the less you actually encounter the attitudes and behavior that need to be corrected, because people will sort of think, well, I will get called out by this person. That person is an ally. They're not going to accept the joke. They're not going to accept the impediment that I'm putting in front of somebody. And so you lose the opportunities to really stand up for it, which is where you kind of need to be from a policy perspective, from ensuring that everybody within the organization is educated to be an ally perspective, so that nobody will tolerate it. That's where you have to kind of go to that next level and sort of look to implement that type of programming. But you can only do as well as what those who need to be educated will listen to and be willing to be educated on. So that's not an answer. It's a bit my answer to the question is, it's just hard and it's case by case, and you just have to keep trying.
I agree with that too. Ditto. Check on
perfect. Love it.
You're absolutely right. It's not easy, and I don't think it's going to get any easier. But what's the alternative? We just don't. You know what I mean? That's not going to help anybody. When you look at a place like a country like Canada, I always say, in my own business, the newsroom should reflect our community, and your businesses all should reflect the community. And our community is diverse, and we're so lucky to be able to have that. I think people need to, if they're not there yet, to reframe their mind about what a gift diversity is. And you're all right in the sense that it's a long road. It's a long road, but you got to keep the good fight. Now, Peter had talked a little bit about some policy within, castles in terms of beyond hiring someone of diverse background, what other policies are in place to actually, support and be inclusive. So I'd like to put out the question to the panel for that. What current policies or policies in the past have been implemented to ensure that there is meaningful inclusivity, equity, and diversity?
So I would say that beyond hiring is just one thread. beyond hiring, you bring in the diverse talents, but how do you keep them? So career development, learning and development, inclusive promotion. There's so many other opportunities to ensure that we keep our talent in the business safe, respected, valued, so that they can keep doing that great work and that we can keep being that great company. But beyond our people is also the customers that we serve. And I think the good thing that is happening today is the rise of that inclusive consumer. I think it was McKinsey that put out that report recently where they're saying that even the consumers are asking this question. So if you as a business don't wake up to smell the coffee and do what is in line with what will give you growth, then you will be losing out at the end of the day, right? So I think it's become even more imperative that we look beyond hiring to say, what are the other pockets of opportunities where we can embed equity and inclusion into the story?
Kathleen or Eve?
I had a Zoom issue, so I might have lost track on. I had to jump off and come back on. Can you restate the question?
Yeah, no, of course, Kathleen. I know we saw you disappear for a second, so welcome back. I was just saying there was a question from one of our guests as well, just asking, what policies have been in place or new policies to actually champion people of diverse backgrounds beyond just hiring them. And as Eve was saying, and I know I've said this before, I hate the checking the box. I don't want to be a checked box. You know what I mean? So what does what does UPS do?
So you're right. We have evolved, I think, faster in the last 2 or 3 years than we had before. Before it was, you're right, checking the box, it was counts. It was set numbers first. And that got us only so far. It actually didn't get us far. So where we've gone in the last few years with an intentional approach, as we've all stated, is number one, we recruit differently. But the biggest thing is, as we keep people in there, we now fund our BRGs. So whereas I told you before, a lot of them started kind of grassroots and they kind of by hook or by crook did what they needed to. We have 180 of them now across the globe of all different types of diversity. And we actually, as a company, give budget to them to do the things that they need to do, to open up doors for themselves, to open up themselves outside of the company as well. So there's some funding that is going on. We actually made some decisions in the last few years. I'm not sure that this is quite honestly the most effective thing. I'll be completely candid. We made everybody go through professional training, which only takes people so far, right? That can be a check mark if people don't apply it. But more importantly than just that kind of training, we actually started launching executive training programs across the organization, but they're specifically designed and specifically targeted to our diverse groups. So allowing those groups to be funneled into those, recognizing them, and not making it generic. So there is a Black executive program, there's an Asian executive program, a Hispanic one, and it's not because we want them to stay in their lanes. We want them to be able to get that experience as a group, bring it back into the company, and we need to create the equity because for so many years we've had training, but they've been left out of it for a variety of reasons. So there's been investment made in our employees across the board. We have higher goals. We give back to the community in larger numbers than we have in the past. And I will highlight one more time, our diversity spend with our vendors. Again, we spent $2.8 billion with small businesses and diverse business and women owned in 2020 alone. And that's, I think, if I'm not mistaken, like a 35% increase over the last few years. And when we've done that, we put out the word to our employee base too, to say, help us find even more in your communities, to find other companies that can supply us. So those are just a few examples. Honestly, I got a whole list from my PR group that if anybody really wants, I'll send it to you, but it sounds a little self-promoting. But there are pieces in here that I'm proud about. And that's what I wanted to highlight is those first key things.
I think it's great that you're promoting and you're sharing, Kathleen, because what we want from the individuals listening in today is to hear the ideas that have worked for all of you and your company so that perhaps they can go back to their own and apply it in some way and maybe it'll work that way. Eve, do you want to add to anything before I move on to some questions from our audience?
Yeah, no, like really what I would say is everyone on the panel is here because we've worked with them and they have been intentional. So I'll start with UPS. UPS, when things got really bad during the pandemic, I was shocked at how much attention they gave us and really worked with us. You know, for a small company, you know, putting their resources. At some point, our packages were getting stuck as we were shipping ingredients, and even the president for Canada would connect with me. So very, 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 very intentional. I'm really seeing the effort being put there. And appreciate it. It's really, it's making the company uncomfortable so that truly we can be comfortable and we can really narrow that gap.
Change
And
only happens when you're
that's how we met.
uncomfortable.
You and I, you and I met because we did a podcast together to talk about this, and UPS wanted your voice to be heard as somebody who was getting recognition, and we were proud to share what we did, but more importantly, we wanted to get exposure too. So win-win, I hope.
Absolutely. And I mean, you know, it has, what I've seen with UPS is that it wasn't just a one-time conversation. You know, there was lots of PR efforts really funded by UPS to support us. And then we are continuing these conversations today. Actually, this afternoon, I was speaking to the UPS Canada team around what does it look like from our lens as a customer. Then, of course, you've seen our product launch at the Hudson's Bay. So the Bay made a commitment that 15% of their shelves are going to be occupied by BIPOC communities. You know, what I really loved in the process is that there was no red tape. You know, you don't have to fill 50 billion pages of paper. And now that our products are on the shelf, the amazing support that they're giving by funding some of the marketing and putting in dedicated staff. And of course, you see the culture from the top all the way to the floor. So there's a commitment for building the partnership. And that acknowledgement saying, you know what, there are gaps, but we want to make this work. How do we really build a small a brand like ours so that it's able to compete?
For sure. On that,
I'll quickly touch on Castles. I cannot miss to talk about Castles. We were the recipient of the Black Entrepreneur Grant last year. So it's not just, the farm is not just working internally to build their teams, but they're also coming out to the communities and saying, what are the businesses? How can we be a part of this? And how do we build them? I will have to say, I cannot wait to launch the new product that we're going to be launching as a result of getting the grant from Castles. Because it's not like they're giving you $50, it's a significant amount of money to really help so that you are able to show significant difference in the business. So thanks everyone. Yeah.
Evelyn has a dream team around her, truly a dream team. I do want to ask you this question, Eve, before we get to the questions from the audience here. I mean, you have all these allies around you, really, that's what it is, who are helping you grow, you know, and you are the CEO of your own company. And I mean, for me to see another woman who is a minority in such a big position like that, I look at that and I go, oh my goodness, you know, it helps me and it motivates me. Tell me, you know, not just for another young Black woman who might look at you, but any other woman of diverse color, you know, how important do you think your role plays in being in that position and hopefully inspiring the others?
You know, I often say that young girls are not going to be the women they don't see. You know, they need to see someone that has similar challenges. It could be color, it could be experiences, cultural experiences, so that they're able to believe a little bit more. They're able to see what is possible. But I also have a little bit of that privilege that we've built these connections that I can, you know, have some of these candid conversations, and hopefully we're able to bring greater understanding and bring the curtain down a little bit so that others can come along. That's really the whole reason why I started the brand, is to build a global connection of empowered women. And of course, it includes now touching on such topics as we are today.
Of course. And you are doing all that, Evelyn. So thank you so much. This question is for the panel. And this is a really good question. So it's not pessimism. I think that it is a question that some of us look, and I mean, I guess cautious optimism. You know, the next generation, I believe they're going to be way more open-minded than, let's say, my parents or my grandparents' generation. Okay. That's just a fact, I think. And so when we look at the future generation, we definitely, I think, I have hope that for sure there's going to be way more inclusion and diversity and, you know, all the things that you guys have been talking about today that have enriched your businesses. But like I said earlier, what about the archaic people and their way of thinking? You know, I expressed concern earlier about how do you change their minds, and you all gave wonderful responses. But do you think that we really can, or do you think we have to wait for the next generation to come in to really make meaningful change? You know what I mean? Like, how hopeful are we that we can really change the minds of those guys? And we all know who I'm talking about, that sit up there. So give it to us straight. Tell us how you really feel.
I can tell you that I believe it's exposure to us, to the community that is modern and is celebrating everybody's differences, that will change the minds of the archaic attitudes. It's you know, if I came from a town of 5,000 people, I moved to a town of 50,000 people, to a town of 500,000 people, to Toronto, which is as big as it's going to get and as multicultural as it's going to get in Canada. And, you know, the small town, there was not very much diversity. And so as a child, I probably didn't have an understanding. I didn't have friends who were diverse, not many friends who were diverse. But as each move exposed me to more and more people, even as somebody who used to think I was young and is slowly losing that view, I have really opened my mind and therefore become an advocate and a champion for all of my friends, and then by extension, everybody who is diverse, because I know them, I recognize, I've learned from them, and you know, I appreciate their perspectives and the value that it brings into enriching my life. So it's a personal way of saying everybody can, you know, have everybody has come from somewhere, whether or not it's a diverse place in the world or not. You are able to open your mind by being exposed and having friends, working with people and learning their value. So
you have hope.
I have hope. I'm gonna go on the hope side.
I have hope as well. I mean, behavioral change is hard, but it is possible. I mean, we've seen organizations that have made micro changes and today are transformed organizations. So with the right exposure, with the right education, with the right champions that keep speaking to these topics like we are today, you know, the more people will embrace. And then I think Kat mentioned, once the numbers start showing as well, some leaders will watch and say, okay, yeah, this is working, because they've seen how, you know, 20 million has gone to 200 million. Not that we want that to be the driver, but I mean, at the end of the day, you find that also moves some people. But I mean, exposure, education, allyship, championship, it's the way to go. It is possible, and we will all get there.
The numbers don't lie.
Who will vote on the hope side, and that's where I am too. But I do acknowledge that there are days when I do have my pessimism about that and the progressions made, especially in a country who still has overt racism going on and an increasing voice as a backlash from some of the things that have progressed in the last 2 years. Sometimes we reverse it right back out with some kind of silliness and craziness. So there are days when I get very frustrated and think, are we really taking enough steps forward fast enough? Because there still seems to be one or two that go backwards. But I'm still going to end on hope, because at the end of the day, again, a small example is that although I don't think we have to wait for the next generation, and I don't think it's the burden of them to fix it all, I think they're starting to have an impact anyways. And a small example, again, without giving too many pieces of information about some of my leadership, we have a leader in my group, in my company, who he himself was probably not the best open-minded, inclusive person possible. But guess what? He now has 2 children who have finally gotten into the workforce. And as his young daughter came home one day with his son, both have started companies, and his son came home so excited about all the great things he had just done that day. He was in a meeting and this happened and he got to do this. And his daughter came home with a very different story, that she was not being heard, that she was hearing that this was happening. And this executive at my company, it blew his mind. It was the first time, and it sounds silly, I grant you, that he truly recognized, like Peter said, that there was an epiphany of sorts that happened in this 50-plus-year-old man when he recognized what his daughter was going through. And as soon as that happened, guess what? He turned around to all of us women in the meeting, and he didn't quite apologize, but he at least acknowledged that he never saw it through that lens. And that gives me the hope that if somebody like that could have that epiphany, and you multiply that out by the number of the next generation who helps to do that for both family and non-family, maybe we get past this. And those pessimistic days will be fewer going forward.
Thanks, Kathleen. Look, I know we can totally have this conversation for another hour. Unfortunately, we are at a time, so we have 4 minutes left. I know that Eve has a challenge for everybody tuning in today and listening in, and I'd love for you to take the platform and wrap this up with some fruit for thought. So before I pass it over to Eve, I just want to thank all the panelists today, Felicia, Kathleen, Eve, of course, Peter, for taking your time and having some meaningful conversations. We've only scratch the surface. There's much more to be done, but this is a start. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, our team, our panelists, for an amazing conversation. This is just the start. We know that there's a lot of work to be done. What I will say is challenging everyone, each one of us, to look deeply and say, what can you do? We have a responsibility. What kind of conversations are you having in the boardroom? What kind of conversations are you having at your dinner table? You know, how are we changing that mindset? And it starts with us. For us, we say, we don't stop being Black after this month. Our challenges still continue. Each one of us has a responsibility to change that a little bit. So I'm inviting you, all of us, you are allies, you are champions, to join us in having this conversation, not just today, but throughout the year. Use your dollars to vote for what your values are. This is the only way we can really start to get that gap to be smaller and smaller. Let's be a little uncomfortable so that we can be inclusive. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye,
Yeah.
everybody.
Have a
Thanks so
great
much,
evening,
everybody.
everyone. Yeah.
Have a good day.
Take care.